Hello and good morning. My name is Phil Ash, and on behalf of the District 207 administration, the Fine Arts departments at Maine East High School, Maine South High School, and Maine West High School, my fellow broadcasting teachers, Ms. Rebecca Orr, Mr. Mason Strom, I'd like to welcome you all to Media Career Day. Before we begin this session, I'd like to say a few words of thanks. First to Mr. Edward Eubank, our Maine East Fine Arts Department chairperson, who supported this idea all the way back in April and worked tirelessly with Ms. Keith and Mr. Barnett to help get every single one of you here today. To all the Fine Arts Department chairs, thank you so much. Also like to thank District 207's career coordinators for their support and encouragement in the creation of this day. And finally, to all of our esteemed panelists, we cannot thank them enough for their generosity of time in being here today to share a bit of their learned knowledge with all of you. All of you here today want to encourage you to take photos and to tell everybody on social media about what's happening today. The only thing I ask is that you use the hashtag Media Career Day 2018 for your Instagramming, your snaps, your tweets, all of that wonderful stuff. The idea for today is simple. As a teacher of media, part of my job is to provide students with opportunities and avenues that could one day lead to a career in radio, film, television, marketing, public relations, social media, any other entity that relies on creating and sharing a message or a story to a large audience through digital means. For a long time, and you guys know this, the dominant narrative told to students wishing to pursue this career pathway was that it's a long shot. You'll never be famous. This career isn't for you. Don't waste your money trying to be Spielberg. Here today, we're trying to change that narrative. And while it is true that media careers remain very competitive, the pathways to these careers have never been broader and more diverse than they are right now. We live in a world where media outlets, avenues, platforms are more diversified, more accessible than at any point in human history. In today's world, as we all know, digital media is constantly evolving, changing, expanding, and it's being delivered every day right to our fingertips. Therefore, learning media literacy and developing the skills to produce media is more important than ever. Every career needs professional media outreach to survive, sustain, and broaden business. They need persons at their companies that can possess the elite skills to write, film, record, edit, and deliver media to the consuming public. Students like you guys are the ones they want, and students like you guys are going to be the ones that deliver. And yeah, it could still lead to a career like Steven Spielberg, but it could also lead to a career in any field that has the desire to promote itself through the use of media. In short, the skills we learn in broadcasting and media production make each of us more hireable and can help take us anywhere we want to go. And our guests today have been to some amazing places in their professional lives. So I welcome all of you to sit back, listen to their stories, ask questions, and absorb the knowledge that these four individuals are about to provide.
That time again, when we venture deep into the great unknown.
And in Chicago, Tom Waddle. He can't run, he's not fast, but he gets open.
A trip inside the mind of a multi-concussed former Bears wide receiver.
He caught everything that was thrown and took every hit that they could give him, and he had an all-time day in the use of smelling salt.
Buckle up, boys and girls.
For me, if I can inspire you in some way to really believe that you can do it, then I've done my job.
Hundreds turned out at the Harold Washington Library yesterday to help Justice Sotomayor celebrate the release of her new children's book, Turning Pages, My Life. Sotomayor took questions from the audience and shared her life story from growing up in the South Bronx to becoming the first Hispanic and third woman appointed to the Supreme Court.
The most successful thing I have done in my life is being successful while bringing all of my family and friends with me.
What I teach, screenwriting and film production, is also what I do. And I think a lot of the faculty here are active in the industry as well as in academia. So you're not just getting a textbook version of how things are done, you're getting exposed to the way things are actually done out in the world. I love film. I mean, that's what drew me to this profession in the first place. My teaching was the second step in the process. I worked in film production for 20 some odd years before I started teaching. And the reason I do what I do is I want to have an impact on the students in such a way that they positively impact my field, which is film. So when I'm 75 years old, I can walk into a movie theater and see a movie that I like with hopefully one of my students somehow associated with it.
We came in and this property came up on the market, and Nick flew in from Toronto, drove halfway down the street and said, "This is it." He had the vision to see that what the capabilities of this is. His budgets from minimum budgets of $5,000 all the way up to the $150 million budgets, and it's all about we're doing a lot of outreaching with the kids. When the kids come in here, kids meeting the students from Flashpoint, Columbia, DePaul, they come in here and we give them stage space and let them. So budgets there's no budgets. Where they don't have the money to do something, but we want to be kind of the big brother with the big shoulders and help them.
All right, so I'm going to introduce our morning panel of guests, and as I call your name, please come on up on stage here and have a seat to my right. You've got a microphone and some water and time. Honored to introduce our morning panel of professionals. First, the Senior Programming Director for radio station WMVP ESPN 1000 in Chicago. Please welcome Maine East High School alum Adam Delavitt. Our next guest works in the Cultural and Civic Engagement Department of Chicago's Public Libraries, where she most recently helped to bring in some amazing special guest speakers, including author Judy Blume, astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. In her free time, you can find her live on the radio for the Chicago Independent Radio Project, or CHIRP. Please welcome Jenny Lezak. You guys can come on up. Yeah, anywhere you like. This next alum graduated from Maine South High School, and he is currently the department chair for the School of Cinematic Arts at DePaul University. Please welcome Mr. Gary Novak. And finally, I'd like to introduce the founder and president of CineSpace Chicago, the largest film and television production studio complex east of Hollywood. Maine East alum Alexander Pisios. All right, I'd like to start, if y'all don't mind, before we start asking questions of you. I think all of the students here would love to hear your stories. So maybe we'll start in the order I introduced you. So, Mr. Delavitt,
okay.
I guess.
Adam, please call me Adam.
Adam, so
Thank
tell
you.
me about your
Hey, guys.
pathway to your career. And I guess we want to know that. And the other thing I think we'd probably like to know as you tell us your story is, looking back in your time in high school, what, if anything, would you do differently to prepare yourself to where you're at right now?
Okay, well, like I said, hi, and I did go to Maine East, so I was a 1994 graduate, and my old broadcasting teacher, Dr. Wunderlich, James Wunderlich, is sitting in the back, is one of the reasons I'm actually in the business and here today, so thank him for showing up. It was a nice surprise to see him. Excuse me. It really started here because the TV and radio station at Maine East, WMTH-TV, was kind of a launching pad for myself. I think it was sophomore or junior year, I noticed there was a sports show that was going on at WMTH-TV called Chalk Talk, and I was a huge sports fan. I still am, and I thought that was great. I loved sports. I loved TV and radio, and I didn't kind of really know what I wanted to do. I was still in high school, I think a sophomore. So I joined, and I started doing Chalk Talk with some of my friends and the teachers, and he just reminded me we had some guests come in, and I think by my junior or senior year, I kind of figured out that I wasn't an on-air personality. I'm a little nervous in front of the mic. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes type of person, more of a director or a producer. And when I went to college, I went to Bradley University in Peoria. I said to myself, you know, if I get nervous every time the mic goes on or the red light goes on, this is not what I want to spend the next 20, 30 years of my life doing. So, like I said, I really enjoyed the behind-the-scenes aspect of everything, and I thought I was pretty good at it. So I said to myself, I'm just going to focus on not doing on-air work and focus on the behind-the-scenes. So I focused on producing, directing, editing in college. And then in a nutshell from there, I went on, did a few internships. I did an internship at WGN-TV, WGN Radio, and I did an internship at a local NBC affiliate in Peoria. And I'll say, and we'll probably talk more about this though, but internships are very, very important. Unfortunately, in a lot of companies, they're scaling back a little bit, but there's still a lot of opportunities out there. It's great hands-on experience to be able to get an internship while you're right done with high school or going into college, because the hands-on experience you get is better than any other class or any other seminar or speaking engagement you can get. And the people you meet, if it's the business you want to be in, is tremendous. So back to me, and then I was hired after my internship at ESPN 1000 I was a nighttime producer, weekends, holidays. You know, when you start out in the business, in this business of radio, TV, the hours and the days are kind of all over the place. So you have to really be committed to working holidays and weekends and nights for a few years at least. I think I did it for 4 years. And I slowly worked my way up to being a producer of a show. I was a producer of a sports talk show in Chicago called Mac, Yurko, and Harry. You probably don't, nobody probably remembers it because it was now going on 9 or 10 years ago. But I was a producer for 7 years, and I loved producing. It was such a great part of my career, my life. I look back now, I miss producing. Being the program director now, I still sort of produce because I'm in charge of all the shows, all the local shows and the talent and the producers, so I still have my hand in all the shows, but it's still hard for me not to go into the studio and pick up the phone or tell a producer to do this or that. I always have to remind myself to, hold back, but that producer in me always comes out. So anyway, I just celebrated my 20th year at the station, and like I said, I'm the program director. I've been that for 8 years, and I'm in charge of all the local programming in Chicago. We're an ESPN station, so what that means is ESPN owns a station in Chicago. We have 3 stations, one in New York and one in Los Angeles. So all my reporting duties and everybody I answer to lives in Bristol, Connecticut. That's where ESPN headquarters are, so I have to go out there 3-4 times a year. Bristol, Connecticut, there's not much going on there except for ESPN. It's a humongous, sort of like college campus of 15, 16 buildings, so it is pretty impressive. But anyway, so that's my, sorry if I'm rambling on here, in a nutshell.
So my name is Jennifer Lezak. I did not go to Maine East, but I did grow up not far from here, and I have many friends today who were grads from the Maine Township high school programs, and some of them were involved with the media studies and in the radio station. So my story is that when I was in high school, I was into theater. Actually, I had done theater even before high school as a child, and I thought that was sort of the path that I was interested in, was acting. And so when I went to college, when I was going to go to college, there was not any money for me to go to college. So I pieced together a bunch of scholarships to enable me to go to college. And I had a theater scholarship, I had a speech scholarship because I had been on the speech team, so I did varsity level debate, and I had a bunch of other little things that I kind of pieced together in order to get that tuition paid so I could go to college. And I went to Loyola University in Chicago, and I studied communication with a concentration in radio, TV, film, theater, and women's studies. And on some days, it seems like I use all 3 of those degrees on certain situations. So when I was in college, I sort of found my attention drawn away from acting towards directing. And then I found out that the college had a radio station. I didn't go to a high school that had a radio station. So when I saw that a girl I knew was at the college radio station, and to be honest, I kind of thought, if she can do it, she's kind of a goof. I can do this. So my best friend and I walked into the radio station on the very next day, and we said, hey, we want to be on the air. And within a week, we were. And so that's kind of how it started. Getting involved with your college radio station is a very sort of easy way to walk into media. So I did that for 4 years. I was a DJ on the air. I was the promotions director and outreach director for the last couple of years. And I worked a lot of jobs while I was in college as well. Some of those jobs were related to kind of media and theater and culture, and some of them were in a factory, which I would not recommend, except for you will really appreciate your opportunity to go to college if you work in a factory. So while I was doing that, I worked at the box office, and I got to see sort of the business side of running a theater, which was important. Often when you're in arts and culture and entertainment fields, you don't actually learn a lot about the business side, and that's really very important. And I also worked at the props house, so I was literally building sets and building props for some periods of time. And then I worked doing lights at the cultural center, so I had a lot of different things going on. I was hustling all the time. And when I got out of college, when I was coming to the end of my college career, I was working, as I said, as the promotions director at the college radio station. And what part of my job was I would call up different venues, and I had relationships with them, and I say, hey, can you give us some tickets to your concerts to give away on our radio show? And I got to know many of the people who were in the publicity or promotions jobs at those venues. And one day, one of them, his name was Zach, he worked at Metro and Smartbar, he said to me, hey kid, do you think you ever want an internship? And I didn't know internships for music venues existed. So I said, well, I'm not doing anything this summer, sure. And so I started interning there. And eventually when I went to graduate college, I said to the owner, I'm going to have to stop interning because I need to find a real job that pays actual money. And he said, well, let's see what we can do. And so he sort of started this position that hadn't existed. It was an entry-level promotions position. And so I worked at Metro and Smartbar and sort of worked my way up to being the publicity director. And I worked there for 14 years. And Metro and Smartbar are independent. If you don't know what they are, they're independent music venues in Lakeview, most famous for launching the careers of people like Smashing Pumpkins or Fall Out Boy. And about 4 years ago, I decided I had gone as far as I could go there. And I was also doing some freelance publicity on the side for a variety of other kind of places. I did a film about Nelson Algren. I did publicity for a literary fest called Story Week Festival of Writers. And through that, I got to know the people at the Chicago Public Library and realized the Chicago Public Library's Harold Washington Library Center downtown has a main stage that does a lot of productions of various kinds. And so a position became open there, and I applied for it, and I got it. And so now I work in what we call the Cultural and Civic Engagement Department at the library. We do all the programming for adult programming, both at Harold Washington and throughout the 80-branch neighborhood library system in every neighborhood of Chicago. So what that means is, like Sonia Sotomayor, who came last week, I get to work with authors, I get to work with theater companies. 2 nights ago, we had a radio drama of War of the Worlds reenactment, which was really fun, which actually was a project I did when I was in college, so everything comes full circle. We get to work with dance troupes like the Joffrey, we get to work with the Lyric Opera, so pretty much a very wide range of cultural programming, and so that's what I do for my job that I work for money. And then as Mr. Ash mentioned on my free time, I also volunteer with the Chicago Independent Radio Project, which is Chirp Radio 107.1 FM or chirpradio.org. I know some of you are probably familiar with it. If you know one of your alums, Luke Bechtel, is involved with Chirp Radio, so I bet some of you have listened. Yes, I see. And so Chirp Radio is a low-power FM community radio station. What that means is it's a nonprofit radio station that was created through the Local Community Radio Act of 2009. When we first started, how Chirp Radio came about is I had been volunteering with my college radio station even after I graduated, and at one point the college said, we're going to kick you all off if you're not students. And so a bunch of my friends and I were like, well, all right, fine, we don't need you. We're going to start our own radio station, which seems like a crazy thing to say, and it was, but we did it. It took some years, and we had to go to Washington, D.C. and lobby to change federal law twice, but we were able to get a license to operate a low-power community radio station. And so what community radio station means is it's run by members of the community. We have 250 volunteers, only 2 paid staff members so far, and we play arts and culture, music, interviews, and sort of a representative of the local community. DJs program their own shows, which is not what you'll find on corporate radio stations, and community radio stations reflect the people in the community. So if you're somebody who looks at radio or TV or film and you don't see yourself reflected there, especially if you're a woman or you're a person of color or somebody with a disability or you're gay or you're trans, community radio station is a great place for you to be, because what you see, what you hear on the air is who is volunteering in the community. So that's the great thing about community radio. And when we were able to pass the law to get our own license, that applied across the nation. So hundreds of radio stations like ours operate across the country because of the law we were able to pass. So I'm on Sundays from 4 to 6 p.m. Tune in.
I'm Gary Novak. Went to Maine South, class of 79, which I think makes me the oldest person up here. If you want to have an idea of what Maine South was in the late 70s, if you've ever seen the movie Dazed and Confused, there are elements of that. I wasn't necessarily some of those characters, but I knew people like that. And the interesting thing is, when I went to Maine South, as a freshman, I wanted to be an astronomer. That was my goal. And part of it is because I'm old enough. I actually remember watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon live on TV, and I thought, well, hell, that's cool. I want to do something like that. But really early on, I realized, you got to know your limitations, and I was not astronaut material. I get vertigo when I get to the top step of a ladder. But I thought, astronomy's cool. You're looking at the stars, but your feet are firmly planted on the ground. So when I entered Maine South, I wanted to be an astronomer. And then I ran into chemistry and physics. And I thought, if I want to be an astronomer, there's probably going to be a lot more classes like this. And it happened to be that at the same time I was doing the science thing, I was taking classes over the summer to get ahead in science. I took biology over the science. Over the summer, I remember dissecting a fetal pig in like July, which was fun. Anyways, while I was doing all that, I was drawn to radio, and I was on WMTH. I wasn't in front of the microphone. I was kind of behind the scenes, spinning vinyl back in the day when they had vinyl, and cutting tape with a razor blade and tape back when they did that. And so after my epiphany about chemistry and physics, I thought, well, maybe I should shift and go into broadcasting. So instead of going to Northwestern for astronomy, which is where I really planned on going, I went to Northwestern, and it was a radio, TV, film major. And at the beginning it was more radio, and by the time I was gotten out, I was doing more film. And one thing that was, I think, a flaw in the educational system back then, and some schools may still be the case now, is they really focus on developing the art, which is really good, but they never think about jobs. So I walked out of Northwestern with no career plan. And I remember sitting in my living room, and occasionally my dad would walk in saying, "Have you thought about insurance? There's a lot of money in insurance." And out of desperation, it turns out that my broadcasting teacher at Maine South, the year I graduated, he quit teaching and started his own production company. And I thought, this guy would never remember me. But when I was really kind of facing a career in insurance, out of the blue, I called this guy and said, the guy's name was Skip Wagner. Probably nobody in the room remembers Skip. He's still alive. But he said, "Yeah, I remember you." And he said, on top of it, "I'm shooting a film in Rockford, and I need somebody to do sound. Do you know how to use a Nagra?" And a Nagra is an old piece of recording equipment that I happen to know how to use, and that's how I got my first job in the business. It was me basically taking a chance, playing a connection that I thought would never pan out, and I ended up starting the career that really hasn't changed since then. So I think a takeaway from that is play your connections. Because we've all been in that situation where we didn't know anybody, and somebody gave us a break. And even now, we may be in a position where it may seem like we're unapproachable. We're going to remember that. So play your connections. So I ended up working in local production in Chicago for a good chunk of the 80s. I ended up doing more kind of corporate training films and occasional commercial. Because of that, I know how to make screws. I know how to make dentures. I know how to pick the right eyeglasses, depending on your face shape. And as you can see, or maybe not, I had this epiphany along the way that it's not just the process; it's the product that matters as well. And I didn't really want to be doing denture films for the rest of my life. And I was lucky that in the late 80s in Chicago, in the Chicago suburbs, cable television had first kind of came into the area. And back then, they would hire anybody to work in cable. That may be the case now, but it's usually on the customer service side. I got a problem and you never get anywhere. But back in the late 80s, there was local production, and they would hire people. And I ended up working in local production, doing high school football games, city council meetings, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of plateaued locally and thought, let's see where else I can go. And somehow I got a job working at C-SPAN in Washington, D.C., and I spent a couple years working on production at C-SPAN. Has anybody ever watched C-SPAN in the room? Has anyone ever watched C-SPAN for more than 20 minutes? Just imagine doing that 5, 6 days a week, 8, 10 hours a day. After a while, I just felt my brain cells dying, and I thought, I just can't keep doing this. So guess what? I decided I got to do something else, and I ended up coming back to Chicago. I think that's a reoccurring theme in my life. I actually got another job working in local production, and the thing was that I was lucky in the place I was working at now was doing more commercials, and commercials are fun. And we were also doing documentaries. And along the way, we got a gig to do a documentary on blindness, treatable blindness in the third world. And it was actually going to be paid for up front. And if you know anything about documentaries, documentary filmmakers are usually scrambling to get money. It's always about trying to get money to finish the film. Well, this was going to be paid for up front. It was actually being paid for by the Lions Club. And this would involve traveling the world. It was going to be going to Europe, Africa, South America, Asia, everywhere. And I thought, this is it. Finally, after all this time paying my dues, making all these crappy films that I'd made along the way, I was finally going to get payoff. Turns out it was a small production company. So initially I thought, we're all going to go. This is going to be great. What happened, though, is as we got closer to actually starting production, the guy that owned the company said, what happens if we're in Africa and a camera breaks? Who's going to send us a new camera? And guess who was chosen to stay behind in case the camera broke? It was me. So basically what happened is they went off to travel the world, and I was sitting at an office in Park Ridge waiting for the latest piece of technology that we had at the time, called a facsimile machine, to spit out a piece of paper saying the camera broke. That piece of paper never came. So I spent my day staring out the window at a gas station and a 7-Eleven, because you got to understand this was the early 90s. And in the early 90s, there was no such thing as the internet. So it wasn't, I could be on Facebook all day, streaming stuff, Googling my name and seeing what showed up. So I was just losing my mind again. And I thought, well, maybe I should do something to expand my mind. So I'll take a class. And I thought to myself, what kind of class should I take? And I'd always toyed with being a writer. I thought, hey, I've always liked writing. I was writing even back in high school. And I thought, well, I'll take a writing class. And there were two classes that were being offered at the place I was going to take the class. One was a screenwriting class, and one was a broadcast journalism class. And I called a friend of mine who went to Northwestern with me, who was actually working in TV news, and I told him what I was thinking. And he said, well, take the broadcast journalism class. But with your production background, you might have to start off in the middle of nowhere, but you're going to move up quickly. Well, being the practical guy that I am, I took the screenwriting class. But the beauty of that is at the end of that class, I had a 120-page script. It was a piece of crap, but it was a 120-page script, which allowed me a writing sample to apply to grad school. And I applied to grad school. I got into the American Film Institute, and that's where I went for grad school in Los Angeles. I spent a good chunk of the 90s in L.A., kind of experiencing the whole L.A. thing. I like to summarize my career in L.A. is I worked on a lot of good movies that never got made and a lot of bad movies that got made. Don't IMDb me. My IMDb page is really screwed up. They have actually combined my IMDb page with another Gary Novak, who's also a jazz drummer. So you get this weird mix of stuff. So if you've already done it,
My students, I think, learned a lot about drummer
Yes.
Gary Novak when
Yes.
we were doing some research.
I do not know Alanis Morissette. I wish I did, but that's not me. If anything has writing stuff, it's probably me. I got tired of LA, which I know a lot of people who aspire to go to LA may think that's crazy. And sometimes in January in Chicago, I think the same thing. I ended up back in Chicago. I didn't want to go back into production. I was kind of burnt on the whole thing, and I thought about teaching. And I stumbled into a teaching job. The way I got the teaching job at DePaul, believe it or not, is there was an ad in the Tribune for part-time instructors. And I applied to it, and I got hired doing part-time work. And within a year, they started a film program at DePaul, because DePaul never had a film program, and I was in the right place at the right time. So I was actually the first person hired into that program, and I was one of the guys that helped build it. And I think the takeaway from my rambling little speech here is, first of all, play your connections. Don't be afraid to ask, and never settle. Never settle. If it doesn't feel right, keep moving on, because it's more about perseverance than anything else. It's not how you look in the first round; it's how you look in the 12th, and if you're still standing. And I think I'm at least in the 12th round. I think they only go 12 rounds now, but it's about just keep moving forward. And we've taken that approach with our program at DePaul. We didn't, we wanted to make a film program at DePaul. If we were going to school today, what would we want that to look like? What would we want the curriculum to look like? What would we want the takeaway our students to get? Which actually led to our partnership with Cinespace Chicago Film Studios, which I think is a way to segue over to Alex.
Hi, my name is Alex Picios, class of 1990 Maine East. So my story is a little crazy. So I, graduated from Maine East in 1990. I actually worked as a special education, special ed center court here during high school, and I took a liking to it. My dad was a special education teacher for Chicago Public Schools, so I went to Northeastern Illinois University. Was going to become a special education teacher. Actually did my student teaching here. I started it at Maine East. At that time, I'm doing my student teaching. I get a phone call from an uncle who owned a fur and leather store in Indianapolis, and this is 1994, and he's opening up a store on Michigan Avenue, and he calls me up and says, "Hey, I'm opening up a store. I need someone I can trust to work there. Can you do it?" I said, "Well, I'm student teaching. I can't do it." I said, "I'm about to start this career. I always wanted to do it, follow my dad's footsteps." Well, he says, "What are they paying you?" And then I remember it was $22,500 to start. And he said, "I'll give you $75,000. I said, "I'll be there tomorrow." So that was the end of my special education career. So, and my father still says I made a mistake. But from there, I worked there. I was on Michigan Avenue retail store for about 8-9 years. After that, I started dabbling a little bit into real estate. So I started buying houses, fixing them up, rehabbing them. Slowly but surely, I actually built a big development company, had about 100 people working for me, building a lot of buildings by the United Center, actually, 18-unit buildings, 24-unit buildings. And then, you guys are probably too young to remember, but 2007, 2008, the real estate market here crashed. And I crashed along with it. So it was a complete disaster. It was real bad. Got evicted from my house with my wife and 3 kids. It was a real dark time for me, and but so you had to persevere. So I go to a wedding in Toronto, and my uncle's there, and he says, "What are you doing? How's things?" I said, "They're fine." I didn't want to get into it much about how things are so bad. And, he pretty much calls me out and says, "Well, obviously things can't be that good in Chicago. The real estate market's crashed. The whole country's in a recession." He says, "You know what? I'm going to fly out to Chicago next week and see what maybe I can help you out. Maybe we can do something together." So my Uncle Nick started Cinespace in Toronto, which is the largest film studio company in Canada, and he was retired, and he was in his 70s. So he came and kind of told me, "Listen, you're a hard worker. You have a little bit of real estate experience, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to borrow you some money, and why don't you go find a 100,000 square foot building, and I'll show you the film industry." So for about 2 years, he'd fly back and forth in, and we'd look at buildings, and finally we found a building, but it wasn't 100,000 square feet, it was almost 1.5 million square feet. And that's CineSpace Chicago now. It was an old steel mill called Ryerson Steel. And with his initial seed of money, I was able to slowly start acquiring, not that first 300,000 square foot building, I proceeded to acquire 4 more of them. And right now we're at total about 2.2 million square feet, over 80 acres, so which makes us the second largest film studio company in the world now, which is really exciting. So along with that, what happened is, you know, our first show was The Boss with Kelsey Grammer, and then Fox had a show called The Playboy Club came in. And what's happening now in our business, content is king. You know, Netflix and Amazon is really, Hulu has changed everything in the film studio business. So right now we have 31 sound stages, and they're all full with shows like Chicago Fire and Chicago Med and Chicago PD, Empire, The Chi, Presumed Innocent. We just signed a deal with Netflix for some new content that's coming in, and Amazon's starting a project called Utopia. So we noticed that there was something still missing. It wasn't just about stages. It was about, Chicago was very weak on infrastructure. So we were able to bring in Cinelease Lighting, which is the largest lighting company in the United States, Keslow Camera. We opened up a casting company. Animation companies on the premises now too, post-production companies. So what's happening now is Hollywood, when I go to my meetings, we've kind of made a mini Hollywood the way it was in the 60s and 70s. So we're a one-stop shop. You come to CineSpace and you have the stages, the lights, the cameras, the post-production, everything you need, the castings, so animation if you need it. So the project there went well, it's going well, it's very successful, but again, there were still more needs. So I started an incubator called Stage 18. So you kept hearing about all these high school graduates, college graduates that had ideas to produce things, to write things, but they couldn't find the money, they didn't have the insurance, they didn't know how to make, how to put the deal together. So Angie Gaffney, who was an alumni of DePaul, and I met her while we actually were donating space to her to shoot some projects. I made her a deal. I said, come in, I'll give you 50% of this incubator, I'll finance it, and let's see what we can do. Well, it's been great. So in this incubator now we have, you know, directors, producers. There's an actual finance company called Chicago Media Angels, where you can go to try to get financing. And it's been great for a place now for people kind of find themselves and make connections and kind of develop their projects right there at CineSpace. And then after that, which is going well, we wanted to open up a foundation called CineCares, because CineSpace is in an area called North Lawndale, which is an area that definitely there's a lot of poverty there. So we started an internship program with NBC, Fox, HBO, Showtime, Amazon. So we have a program that you have to be minimal a high school graduate up to college graduate, and you get a paid internship on the shows that are shooting there. And it's a 4-month internship. And after that, if there is, and you get to pick, you know, if you want to work with wardrobe, if you want to work with hair and makeup, behind the camera, in front of the camera, and post-production. And after that, there's a segue now to get into the union, IATSE 476, which is the union that pretty much covers most of the film industry. So that's been really successful. We've had 4 graduating classes of 15 each, and we're at 90% of those interns have gotten jobs. And these are jobs, you know, good jobs, you know, starting $50,000, $60,000 a year with benefits and insurance. So we're really proud about that. And you know, I'll leave you with, you know, life's crazy. You know, from special education teacher to selling outerwear coats to owning this film studio now and trying to do great things. We got 15,000 people working there right now. And since we opened up in 2011, we've generated close to $7 billion in revenue. And it's been really about outreaching and partnering with schools like DePaul. DePaul is the only school in the United States that actually has a classroom and stage on an actual studio lot. And DePaul, which when they started with us 5 years ago, wasn't even ranked probably in the top 100, right? Yeah, you know, the Hollywood Reporter just came out, they're ranked 13th in the country, which is phenomenal. And 13th is, it's still going to go higher and higher. The program's really succeeding, and DePaul's really taking ahead of Columbia, Tribeca, and they're really moving forward and doing great things. But again, life, you never know where life takes you. Don't give up, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. At this time, what we're going to do, we're going to get to ask all these panelists some questions. We're going to do this in two separate phases. I know all of you in classes over the past few days have been generating questions for each of these individuals. And so what I would like to do, I'd like to invite my colleagues, Mr. Strom and Ms. Orr, if you guys could come join us on stage. And yeah. And I think what we're going to do is we have a lot of your questions that you guys generated over a couple days ago on note cards. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time going through those questions. And, you know, panelists, feel free to, you know, some of these questions are directed to specific individuals, but if you feel the need to jump in and add on, feel free to do so. And then in a little while, we're going to just kind of open it up to just the old-fashioned raise your hand and ask. So I guess we'll start. Mr. Strom, you want to start things off?
Yeah. All right. So the first question is for Alex. This is from Kevin Murphy, and you want to know what about Chicago made you want to open Sin Space?
Well, I tell you, Chicago, being born and raised here, obviously was first, but you know, Chicago was a big film hub in the '80s. I mean, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 16 Candles, Blues Brothers, About Last Night. I mean, and what happened was it just the Canadian. Why really a lot of people don't understand that the film industry dried up here. One, there wasn't many sound stages. Two, the Canadian dollar at that time dropped to 50 cents. It was almost 50 cents to the dollar. So a lot of the business went to Canada. And Chicago, I mean, is the greatest place to film. Dick Wolf, I love his quote recently. You know, they said, "What's it like shooting in Chicago?" He says, "Chicago is the best character on all my shows because it really changes the look on with the four seasons." You know, he was talking about spring, summer, autumn, and fall, and how great the look is when they have in the different seasons. The locations, I mean, the buildings in Chicago are gorgeous. Downtown, the architecture. And you got to remember, they want a country look. You can find that in Chicago. You want the city look. You want the lake look. So Chicago, we came here because I'm from here, but it definitely had the bones already from being such a film hub in the '80s to just take it to the next level, which it has become now.
And I have a question for Jenny. This is from Jalen. And he would love to know, how do you keep from getting nervous when you're on the radio? And what do you do to calm your nerves?
That's a great question. Okay, these aren't working anymore. That's a great question. So I am not somebody who's generally particularly nervous talking in general. So I think I was kind of born without that kind of stage fright anxiety gene, so to speak. But I do a lot of training of new DJs on the air, and so many of them are nervous when they're first doing it. And I always tell people, like, remember, you're going to screw up once. Just, like, accept the fact that you will screw up. You'll play the wrong song. You'll say the wrong, ad or whatever the case may be. So just accept that you will make mistakes and then move forward and learn from them. So when people go on air, I tell them to just take a few breaths. And especially when you're first starting, I don't know if you guys, any of you are on the radio, I suggest that people write down what they're going to say, even though you kind of know in your mind what you're going to say. Sometimes when you push that button and you see that on-air sign go up, it all goes straight out of your mind, right? So especially the first few times, like, I'm like, write down what you're going to say exactly on a little Post-it note, and then if you get nervous, you can just glance down and say, oh, right, I was going to tell people about the concert happening next week, or whatever the case may be.
All right, this is for Adam and maybe also for Jenny. We'll see if you guys want to jump in. So this is from Neil. Neil, where are you at? Raise your hand, man. There's Neil. Where do you see the future of radio, and where is the medium going? I think that's sort of a big question that I think a lot of people have.
I don't think this is a great question.
Keep
hello,
trying.
hello, test.
Yeah, we're good.
It's one that I I think about daily. You know, I think someone said content is king, and that is very true. So, you know, in Chicago, I'm in charge of producing Chicago sports content for the Chicago audience. So it lives on radio, AM 1000 is the station, but obviously, you know, we're on the ESPN app, so there's a digital component. There's also we have a State Street studio downtown, so we're right across from the Chicago Theater on State and Lake. And if anyone's ever been downtown, Channel 7, ABC, we share the building with them because we're all ABC, owned by Disney, ESPN, all one big company. So we share the building with them, and they have a State Street studio, and so do we. So we're also on site. But when I was saying content is king, you know, as long as you're producing content that an audience wants, they're going to find it, whatever platform it's on, whether it's terrestrial radio, satellite radio, a podcast, like I said, on site. How many, if I can ask real quick, how many listen to podcasts? Wow. And that's about 75, 80%. And how many people listen to terrestrial radio, AM or FM? Not you, Mr. Wunderlich, back there, I see you. I'm sorry, can I see one more? Terrestrial radio? And how many on the AM dial? Okay, and the rest FM. It's pretty much what I thought. You know, people have been saying terrestrial radio is dying, FM and AM radio is dying for the last 10 years, and it's not dead yet. There's still money to be made at these radio stations, especially in what we do. It's kind of a niche. It's sports radio, and it's local sports radio. So if you want Chicago sports talk after a big Bears game or after a big Cubs playoff game, you know, there's only a few options to go to, us and our competitor, The Score in Chicago, for local sports talk to get fan reaction. You know, FM radio, there's so many places to get music, as you guys know. Spotify and Pandora was just bought by Sirius, and Apple Music and whatever else you guys use, right? I mean, who waits through a commercial break anymore for a song that they want to hear? No, you just tell or write what song you want to hear. So we live in an on-demand world, and it's a very scary, changing world for what I do, because I work at a corporate commercial radio station, and just to give you an idea, we run about 15 to 16 commercials an hour, which is a lot, because when you try to break them up and make segments, there's not a lot of room for the guys or girls to talk about sports, tell you if to take another break. And the advantage of a podcast or something else is, like I said, it's on demand. You can listen whenever you want, wherever you want, however you want. And while we have digital products like podcast and we stream, you know, my base is in the terrestrial radio world. So I don't know if I answered your question, because I don't know if I have the right answer where it's going, but I will say that, you know, as long as you're producing content for whatever audience you're looking to, I think, you know, people will find it, whatever platform you're on. So like someone said, content is king is very true.
I would say now it's working again. I would say from the music side of things, you know, what he said is true. In fact, I was listening to sports talk radio on the way over here this morning because I wanted to hear about the Blackhawks. People want to hear what's local to them. You can put on Pandora, you can put on Spotify, and some computer algorithm is going to tell you exactly what they think you want to hear. But what we hear at Chirp from our listeners and from our donors, which are thousands and thousands of people keep telling us, like, we didn't leave radio as a listener, radio left us. So corporate radio stations, particularly with music, you got your Clear Channel, 95% of those stations aren't playing what people are really interested in hearing, right? And so that's why people started just listening to their iPods or listening to their own music collections. And as soon as we launched Chirp, and last year we launched our terrestrial, we were online for many, many years before we were able to get the antenna. And that afternoon, I was on the air about 2 hours after we flipped the switch for our antenna at 107.1 FM. And I started getting calls from people, and all they would say is, "Who are you? I've never heard a radio station like this before. Who are you guys?" And to us, that really showed that what we were doing was really what people want to hear. And that's continued to be what we hear from our listeners. And I don't know where corporate radio, music radio is going. I think that is a major problem they're going to have to sort of sort out. But for community radio stations, for low power FM radio stations, it's never been stronger. People are interested in what is locally happening in their community. They want to hear diverse voices. They want to hear themselves reflected in the media they consume. And so we've been very fortunate. You know, Chirp, as I mentioned, is a nonprofit. We survive because of donations from listeners and small grants. We don't get government funding. We don't do commercials. We don't have any major, corporate donors or anything like that. And so we have thousands of people who give $5 a month, $10 a month, maybe just, $20 at the end of the year. And that's what makes up our budget and makes us, successful and able to keep going. So the test for us is, can we continue to operate and pay our rent and our electric bill? And so far that has been shown that that's what people do want, because they are giving to make us successful.
I think I'm back on. All right, awesome. All right, this question is for Gary. This comes from Marie, and she wants to know, how has the cinematic arts program at DePaul evolved over the past 15 years? You touched on it a little bit, but could you expand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to the idea of, again, we've all, how am I going to phrase this? It goes back to what I said about not settling. When the film program at DePaul basically was started with 3 people. And the approach we had at the time was, again, if we were in film school today, what would we want that film school to look like? What courses would be, offered? What equipment would be used? All of that. And we lucked out. Again, I think a lot of this in life is about opportunity, happenstance, weird stuff that happens that at the time just seems like something, but it ends up being fortuitous when you look back on it. In 2003, when I was still part-time in communication, I'm going to get to the answer, just give me a second. When I was teaching part-time in communication at DePaul, one of the guys I was working with had decided to see if they wanted to do a full-time, a degree in film. And he went to the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and said, hey, I've got this idea for a film degree, do you want to do it? And the dean said, thanks, but no thanks. Film degrees historically are capital intensive, costs a lot of money, and it's a professional degree. And the College of Liberal Arts at the time didn't want any more professional degrees, and they didn't want to put out the money. Well, it turns out that the guy I worked with was friends with the president of the university. They played video games together. And the president of DePaul at the time was a priest, so he was playing video games with this priest. And the priest said, I understand your frustration. Why don't you go talk to Helmut Epp, the dean of the School of Computer Science? He likes to build things. Fortuitous. Because what happened in 2003, the dot-com bubble had just burst, which means computer science enrollments were declining. He was looking to diversify, and there was this thing on the horizon called digital cinema, which at the time, if you thought digital cinema back in 2003, people just thought projection. They didn't really think content creation. But the dean was willing to do it. So our film program at DePaul started in the School of Computing, which was bizarre. I mean, when we first started, we had this film degree in the School of Computing, and we were all film guys, and we basically were downplaying the computer science element, basically saying, oh, it's a regular film program, it's a regular film program. What ended up happening, though, is eventually the rest of the world caught up with us, so within 2 or 3 years, people were coming to DePaul because it was a digital program. And the reason we embraced digital, to be quite honest, is what digital did is it lowered the cost of production. In the past, if you wanted to make films in the old analog days, you needed lots of money or you needed to know somebody. What digital did is drop the cost of production. You could make films for next to nothing. It democratized the medium, and we embrace that. And that's been one of our through lines the entire time we've been running the film program. It's about providing access to those that in the past have not had access to the means of production. That's been the driving force. And the whole curriculum and the whole approach to teaching the classes is about giving people the tools to tell their stories. It was touched on a little bit when you were talking about radio and the corporatization of radio, right? I remember when I was in high school back in the 1970s, the radio station that everyone listened to was WXRT. The reason everyone listened to XRTs back in the 70s, the DJs programmed their shows. They got to pick whatever they wanted to play. Over time, XRT became corporatized, and it wasn't much different from the, quote, more mainstream radio stations. Well, that has been happening in Hollywood for years, right? The problem with Hollywood right now is the idea that it's this mass thing, right? Hollywood is investing all of this money in $200 million films. And because of the amount of money that they're investing in these films, they're not going to take chances on new people, right? Are they going to give a new writer the opportunity to write a script for a $200 million film? Hell no. They're going to hire somebody they already know, somebody with a proven track record. Are they going to hire an unknown director to direct these? No, they're not. But what digital has done is given people in this room the opportunity to make films. In high school, I couldn't have made a feature film. Everyone in this room right now can make a feature film. Hell, you can shoot it on your iPhones. People have already done that. That's the future. The future of cinema right now are the people in this room, plain and simple. And the kind of our motto, our mantra at DePaul is about giving you access to the knowledge and the tools to do that. The future of cinema, the future of the art form that I love is here. It's not in Hollywood. And the beauty, if you look at the history of Hollywood, is historically what happens in Hollywood is they get to a certain point and they implode. They did it in the late 60s. The studios were turning out blockbuster flops. Has anyone heard of a film called Paint Your Wagon? All right, thing about Paint Your Wagon, it was a Western, it was a musical, and Clint Eastwood sang. So that was the kind of product that Hollywood was turning out. And then what happened is a group of outsiders, a group of renegades. One guy was a son of a Hollywood star. The son's name was Peter Fonda. And the other good was a guy named Dennis Hopper, who used to hang out with James Dean, and he kind of fallen into out of favor with the studios. They made this film, which was basically a Western on motorcycles, called Easy Rider, that made a fortune. And Hollywood, which was desperate because they were losing money, said, well, we don't really know what these guys are doing, but we can hire them to do what we're doing. Hire them to make the movies for us, which is what happened. And it led to the whole film school generation, the whole new American cinema of the late 60s and early 70s. That's where people like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and Francis Ford Coppola came from. But typical of Hollywood, you know, people that are the best sometimes become some of the worst, that by the time the 80s rolled around, it was starting to implode again. It had run its course. And then all of a sudden, you had these small film festivals, places like Sundance, that nobody ever went to. We're turning out these films that were getting everyone's attention. And out of Sundance came people like Robert Rodriguez, Spike Lee, and others. Tarantino came out of these. And all of a sudden, guess what? Hollywood embraced them because they needed content. And that has now run its course. If you look at the movies that are being put out by Hollywood, they're remakes, they're sequels. There's not a lot of original content. We're on the verge of another great implosion. And when the cracks in the wall happen, the outsiders can come in and basically rescue the art form. And the interesting thing is that first one in the late 60s was a bunch of white guys with beards. In the early 90s, that film school kind of revolution, I should say film festival revolution, I can't speak, I'm sorry, were people of color, but primarily male. I think we are on the verge of a diversity revolution in cinema. The voices that have not been heard before, people of color, women, trans, now is your opportunity. We're on the verge of it. And one of the things that we've always been trying to do is to give these people, as well as everybody, the tools to do that. I mean, so I think that's the thing about DePaul. It's about access, and it's about looking to the future.
have a question for Alex. This is from Jaden and Phoebe. And they would like to know, what advice do you have for high school students who want to become filmmakers? And specifically, I was wondering if you could touch on internship opportunities. I know you mentioned that before in your opening remarks.
Yeah. Well, a high school graduate and you're interested in film, I mean, obviously, I think it's a great idea to go to school like a DePaul, obviously a Columbia, and a film school. But the most important thing, so George Lucas, and I think there's a great story about trying to get into the film industry. You know, George Lucas was at the campus one time, and I was talking to him, and I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I'm here to see Jet." You know, Jet's his son. And I said, "What's he doing here?" He says, "Well, he finally decided that he wanted to get in the film industry. He wants to be a producer, director. He's not sure." So here's Jet asking his dad, "What should I do?" And he told him, "Go become a PA, because that's the only way you're going to learn." You know, so, and I spoke at graduating classes, and I say, you know, here's George Lucas, one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, his advice to his own son, and here's a guy that could pick up the phone and help him anyway, go become a PA. So he was, 3 years he was a PA on Chicago Fire, you know, filing, getting coffee for people, running around, you know, and that's really the best way in this industry, is to work the ground up. You know, there is no secret sauce. You know, you can graduate from a film school and you're going to be a director, but your best way to get into the industry by us at Cinespace is as a PA. You know, the internship program now, which could be something that after high school, say you guys don't want to go to college, you know, that's where the internship program comes in. You know, at Cinespace, you would apply for an internship program, and then hopefully, you know, work on Chicago Fire, PD, or whatever's going to be there over the years. And after that, getting into the union, you know, because 95% of the jobs at a film studio are union jobs. You know, so if it's hair and makeup or special effects or a gaffer or a cameraman or whatever it's going to be, you know, you get into the union. But it's definitely one of those, the film industry is definitely one of those things where there isn't no secret sauce. You know, you really got to work hard. You're really going to work from the ground up. But most of these people that come into this industry do it with passion because they love the film industry. They want to be in it. They want to work the 14, 15 hours a day. You know, everyone has this idea that the film industry is glitz and glamour when it's really just working and grit. I mean, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. But you got to love it. It's got to be in you. And I think that's, you know, that's the answer.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I mean, I think the key, and this is from working in it as well as seeing students being successful in it, it's very simple on one level. It's show up on time, do what you're told, and when you're done doing what you're told, asking, is there anything else I can do? That's the key. It's in some respects, that old-fashioned Midwestern work ethic will get you ahead. We have an LA quarter program. Our students intern in LA during that quarter, and it turns out 90% of our students who have attended the LA quarter and stay there after graduation are working in the industry. And I think why that is they stand out. Because I'll tell you right now, I lived in LA for 9 years. Showing up on time, doing what you're told, and when that's done, asking what else can be done is actually rare. And if you can do that, you'll get ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to echo that, yeah. You know, when I was working in LA at the company that I work for, it was founded by Midwesterners, and we never intentionally hired people regionally, but we did eventually stand back and realize that most of the people that we hired are Midwestern. There is something to the Midwestern work ethic, and I actually want to go ahead, and Gary kind of touched on something, and the question I had, this next question I had was for Gary, but I want to open it actually to everybody, so I'm going to have this go on down the line. This is from Mikey. He's running a camera. By the way, shout out to my students that are live streaming today. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. So aside, and again, this is really for everyone, so please go on down the line here, but aside from writing talent, on-air talent, cinematography, what skills do each of you value in your employees, and what does the industry value? We talked about, obviously, just the adage of showing up on time and doing what you're supposed to do, but how would you all maybe add to that question?
I'll go first. I think everything that Gary was saying, you know, being on time, being early actually, and staying late and doing whatever you can obviously is a big help. But when I hire people or I hire interns or workers, you know, really looking for someone going the extra mile with a creative mind. In my specific position, we're looking for people that know sports. You know, if you work at ESPN in Bristol or you work at ESPN in Chicago or LA, you do have to take a sports quiz when you get interviewed to get past the interview process. So I don't know if anyone's heard about that. You do need to know something about sports. And it's not that easy for all the national sports. Maybe for Chicago, if you guys are all Chicago sports fans, you might be able to do it. But anyway, so for what we do, you do need to know a little bit about sports. But I'm always looking for that extremely creative person who's not afraid to come with an idea or a thought. You know, for many years, we ran a big internship program. Right now, we're on a little hiatus, but hopefully that'll come back in a year or two. And you, like someone was saying, you always know the interns that stand out, that are persistent, and everybody says, you know, oh, they're bugging you, too persistent, or I'm calling you too much. I don't buy into any of that. I would be as persistent as you can. I remember coming out of college and having a list of 23 or 24 people, contacts that I wanted to contact, and I remember one person got back to me, but that one person led to a network of other people. So anyway, so what I was saying was creativeness, open-mindedness, and being a willing participant to, you know, engage in different ideas. You know, we're talking about diversity. We do show meetings every day, and I try to bring as many people in the station who are there in the show meetings, because you want different viewpoints from different people on every subject, even though, you know, people say we're in the toy department because we're talking about sports, and that's true, but you still want different viewpoints and different opinions from all different people. So,
yeah, so I would agree, showing up on time. I used to do the hiring and firing for the internship program at the Metro and Smart Bar, and you would be surprised at how many people get hired and they just never show up. So that is true. I think also having good skills, asking good questions, being involved and engaged in the work that you're doing, even if it's super boring, like something like filing. Remember that even if you have a very low entry-level position, somebody has to do that job. And if you're not there, somebody else will take it, or somebody above you is going to have to do it and will be annoyed by it. So your role is important, even if you are just going to get coffee. Somebody has to go get the coffee, right? So I think, you know, thinking about it in that way is good too. For me, just to add, I agree with everything they said too, but I would also add one of the things that when I would interview prospective interns, I mean, I would have 200 people applying for 2 slots when I worked at Metro and Smart Bar, because everybody wants to work at the coolest music venue in town. So there were a lot of qualified people, but one of the other things that I looked at is when I was talking with them in the interview, did they seem like somebody who I wanted to spend several hours a week with? Did they laugh at my jokes was sort of like the thing that I would joke about, but it was partially true, is are these people who I want to be with in my office? And so I think being friendly and engaged and open is a big part of it too. And I'm still very good friends with some of the people who I hired as interns, and I've helped them to get other jobs in the industry after that. So, and that's been, you know, going on for 15 years, I think.
Yeah, for me, it's one word: passion. If you're passionate about this, everything else falls in line. I mean, if you think about a career in this field, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I may be talking more about film and television, but I think it also applies to radio. I just haven't worked in radio in this century. It's just age, you know. But it's passion. I mean, when you get right down to it, because, you know, this is not just a job, right? If you're looking for a paycheck, there's easier ways to make money, right? As far as I'm concerned, it's not even a career, because to me a career is something you do until you hit whatever retirement age happens to be, and you decide to go get to that retirement home, you know, sail around the world, whatever you want to do. This is a way of life. You will do this until the day you can't do it anymore. I mean, if you think about it, how many film directors are out there still making movies? There are people making movies in their 80s. They're not doing it for the paycheck. They're doing it because they can't think of doing anything else. So if you're passionate, everything falls into place. And if I'm talking to somebody and they're passionate about this, they will work those extra hours. They will try to learn more. right? They'll show up on time. Why? Because they're passionate and they really want to do this. So it's about passion. If you're passionate, you'll succeed.
Yeah, I mean, everything everyone said up here definitely touched on everything. You know, we filled about 100 PA jobs in the last 12 months, and you know, they all come through me, and then I give them to the shows. And when I interview them, I always tell them, you know, show up 15 minutes early, be positive, smile when you walk in. You might be having the worst morning in the world. Walk in with a bozo smile, and I'm ready for the day. You know, what can I do? And always ask questions. The PAs, I tell them, you don't become a PA because that's what you want your career to be. You get in the door, well, all of a sudden maybe the art department is intriguing you, maybe the sound department is intriguing you. Well, start talking to the people in that department. Start asking them questions. Start asking them, let's go get a sandwich after filming. You know, keep talking to people, and then the PA, that's why it's such a great first spot, because as a PA, you start to, it opens your door to every department there is, locations department, so you start to see what each department does while you're in the offices, and then you decide kind of what intrigues you and start, again, follow the path and start asking questions.
And if I could just add real quick, not just in these fields, but you know, listening is a skill that a lot of people don't possess. And the people that tell you they're great listeners are usually the worst listeners. But listening is such an important skill, especially attention to detail. So I deal with it on a daily basis with hosts and talent and producers who sometimes don't listen. It's a big pet peeve of mine, but listening is definitely a skill.
This is for Adam. Jenny, you can jump on this in on this as well. Kaylee wants to know, how do you decide between what content that you broadcast on a daily basis and what content you don't? And then do you find yourself favoring certain sports over others?
Well, me personally, I'm a White Sox fan.
I'm sorry.
But why is that's a joke. We don't have that many White Sox fans here, do we? There's no way.
We're going to divide the room up now.
Everybody's a Cub fan. Everybody's a Cub fan. So I'm a diehard White Sox fan, and we don't do a lot of White Sox talk at all, just because there's not a ton of White Sox fans in Chicago. It's about 80-85% Cubs to 10-15% White Sox. And as much as that kind of hurts me, you know, you kind of know what the listener wants, and we're not going to do 80% of White Sox talk when, you know, I want to keep people listening. I don't want them to, you know, hit the button and go somewhere else. But it's a good question on daily content. Like I said, you know, we're ESPN, but we're ESPN in Chicago, so we try to stick to Chicago sports content. Sure, we talk about every national sports story going out there. When LeBron loses a one-point game the other night and misses 2 free throw shots, or the fight from 2 weeks ago from the Rockets or Lakers. We talk about all that stuff, but we try to focus on the 5 major sports teams in Chicago and what's going on. They always say in radio, you play the hits. Like in FM radio, if there's a very popular song, you're going to hear it every hour, maybe sometimes twice an hour.
Not on Chirp.
Not on Chirp. That's very true. But on sports talk and news talk, we want to play the hits as well. So today, obviously, you know, the Bears are always a big topic. So we always try to get our show crews to come up with a different angle or talk about the Bears. Sure, you can come into a studio and just say, we're going to talk about the Bears today, but you can't just turn on the mics, throw on the headphones, and just recreate and think there's going to be listeners there. You have to have a plan. You have to have a topic, a few questions, a few guests. You got to sprinkle in some bells and whistles to make it entertaining, because like I said, in this world we live in, you know, it's hard to get people's attention for more than 5-10 minutes at a time. So we stick to Chicago local sports content. Like I said, I sit in the show meetings every day. I let the producers run them. I'm just more of a sounding board and make sure they're on ESPN, you know, brand friendliness, that there's nothing, you know, off par. But and they pretty much stick to, you know, if the Cubs were in the World Series right now, obviously it would be the #1 topic. You know, it's funny, Blackhawks, I love the Blackhawks. I love going to Blackhawks games. Hockey talk, as far as sports talk goes, does not rate well, so we don't do a ton of it. But we love hockey, and we know the fans love hockey. But when you talk about a hockey topic for 10-15 minutes, people are doing this in their car. They're punching the button, so you don't want to always do that. So Bears, Cubs, and whatever other hot sports topic of the day is kind of how we plan our day. Hope that answered your question.
For Chirp, we have an overall programming philosophy, so it's similar to a radio format, which you're probably familiar with. Radio stations have formats. So our format is independent music, locally focused, and enhancing the arts and culture scene of Chicago. That's sort of our mission statement. So DJs pick every song they play from our vast library of tens of thousands of songs. You're required to play at least minimum of 2 Chicago bands or artists per hour. And then we also have sort of our heavy rotation songs. So there's about 150 albums that are in heavy rotation, and you have to pick 5 of those per hour. But other than that, DJs can play whatever they want. At Chirp, we try to have a variety of genres and also of eras of time. So you might tune in and you might hear like Mavis Staples song from the 60s next to something that just came out from a local band last week. And that's kind of what we're trying to go for, and it's been very receptive by our listeners. For me as the DJ on the air picking what to play, I think it's more art than science. And so when I'm looking at like any particular day that I'm in the studio on a Sunday afternoon, a lot of it is like, what do I feel like hearing today? What's the weather like today? Like, was I out having brunch with friends in the sunshine?
Sounds nice.
Right? And then I want to play something sunny, or is it kind of like a gloomy fall day and I want to play some like, somber kind of music. So I'm really driven by that. Sometimes I do fun shows, like I always do a Halloween show that's all, spooky kind of themes, and I do a Thanksgiving weekend show that's all songs about food. So our DJs have a lot of freedom, and that's, I think, appealing to our listeners.
So I have a question for Adam. This is from Nathan, and he would like to know, out of all of the different sporting events you have ever worked on, broadcasted, which has been the most memorable game?
So I said I was a White Sox fan, and I went to every White Sox World Series game in 2005, which was great. I also got to go to all the Cubs World Series games in 2016, so I was at all the games in Cleveland. And being a White Sox fan, it was a little interesting because I wasn't going to cheer for the Cubs. It's just not in me to do it. So I wasn't going to root against them, though, because I don't want to be that person either, because we're a Chicago radio station. We're in
Those
Cleveland.
Indians, though,
Those Indians, And the White Sox division's tough. So I found one White Sox fan in my row at Game 7 who, after, I'm sure we have a lot of Cub fans here, after Rajay Davis hit that home run and then the rain delay happened, there was only a couple of us fist bumping in the aisles. There was 2 Sox fans there, but that was a very cool event. I will say I'm very fortunate. I've been able to go to many Super Bowls. I've been to 10 or 12 Super Bowls. I've been to All-Star games. I've been to World Series. So I've been very fortunate. But I would say I'm a big golf fan as well. The Ryder Cup was at Medina about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was here local. I didn't have to travel anywhere, and it was one of the coolest events I've ever had. If anyone's a golf fan, I just didn't know it was that rowdy at a golf event, and since it was in our backyard, it was very cool. But yeah, I'm very lucky and fortunate to be able to go to a lot of these events over the years. A lot of games, meet a lot of athletes. Some are nice, some are not nice, but that's okay, just like the world goes. So.
This question is for Alex, and this is from Pallavi. Where you at, Pallavi? Hi, Pallavi. So how hard is it to compete for a film or a television show's business, and how often do you lose out to, whether it's Los Angeles, because I don't know if you're competing against cities, if it's, in different like tax burdens and things like that, but like if it's competing against, Los Angeles or Toronto or Vancouver. I know things shoot in Georgia now. How does that work?
Yeah, so
what's the process?
The most important thing is it's the states. So it's in the United States, it's states going against states, and Illinois has a great tax credit. It's Illinois Film Tax Credit. So to give you an idea, they give 30% back for any production that's shot in Illinois. So let's use a $10 million movie gets shot in Illinois. $3 million goes back in a tax certificate to the studio. And the way Illinois has a good one, they force the studios, they have to spend that $10 million in our state. They have to hire Illinois people. They have to buy all their equipment from Illinois, or rent it. We're Georgia right now, for example, which is doing more business. But they're doing something similar to what Michigan did and lost, Iowa did and lost, North Carolina did and lost. Is you shoot in Georgia now, they have a very similar thing. They have around 30%, but you don't have to spend the money in Georgia. So in other words, Tom Cruise shoots a movie in Illinois. State of Illinois does not give anything for his salary. Tom Cruise shoots a movie in Georgia, and Tom Cruise gets paid $10 million. Well, $3 million of that comes out of the Georgia taxpayers, even though he pays taxes in California. So our incentive here, which is why we've invested and keep expanding at CineSpace, we like our credit. Democrat governor loved it, Republican governor loved it, the Senate loves it, the House loves it, because you're forcing the studios to come spend the money in our state and hire our people. Like in Georgia, when you go to Georgia right now, and they go shoot a movie, they bring a lot of people from LA there, because it doesn't matter. They're getting 30% of their salaries. Here, you don't get it. You got to hire our people here. So competition, really, believe it or not, I'm out of space. I just bought another steel mill about 5 minutes away. We're building another 4 stages. We just can't keep up now with this content. Jim Giannopoulos, who's a good family friend of ours, and he's a president of Paramount Studios, told me, get ready, you're hitting the second golden age of television. What's happening now more than ever, and it kind of hits on what Gary said, feature films are not what they used to be. If you're going to see a $100 million movie now, it's going to be Transformers 26. It's going to be, it's going to be something that, Superman 32. I mean, something they know they're getting their money back in. What's happening now, and they've done their studies, and it's your generation that's really changing it. There was a study done, which I thought was great. It was a LaGuardia Airport. The plane was 2 hours delayed, and they followed what every passenger did during those 2 hours. And people, mostly 45 and above, went to the bar. Everyone between 16 to 35 sat down in the waiting area and watched 2-3 episodes of something. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, NBC, they watched more television. So the studios now sharpened up and said, why should we go spend $100 million to go make a feature film that has such a great chance to flop? Why don't we start making a lot of television content, 8, 9, 10 episode stuff? And to go back to it, business is great, where we can't handle it because of this content craze right now, and we don't see anything slowing down at all, and business just keeps growing and growing.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on this related to DePaul's relationship with CineSpace. The reason we have the partnership with CineSpace is Alex's uncle Nick realized if their business model succeeded and was as successful as it was, there wouldn't be enough crews in Chicago to man the shows. So they needed to partner with the university. And by partnering with DePaul, we're basically the farm team for the local film industry. And it turns out we have students that are getting jobs on the shows before they even graduate. We have students that basically maintain our stages at CineSpace. They're student workers. They just make sure it's clean and the gear is where it's supposed to be, that are taking days off from their student worker job so they can have day play jobs on the shows, one-day freelance gigs. We've got students that are graduating and getting jobs. We have students that are getting in the unions a lot quicker than they've ever gotten in the unions before. This is the time to be in Chicago. It's blowing up. And so you may want to think about going to the coasts, but I'm telling you right now, the way that the industry is moving locally, there's not a better place to be. And with the way our facilities are set up at CineSpace, there are 3 professional stages. They're operated like professional stages. They're not teaching environments that are pretending to be stages. Our students are working on professional stages, getting on-the-job training before they ever get on the job. They can walk out of our stages and walk on to Chicago Fire and pretty much know where everything is and how everything operates. So it's something to keep in mind that we are on the verge of something. I think ultimately, this is my goal, is that within 10 years, Chicago will not be just Chicago. The industry will be looking at, well, we could shoot in New York, we can shoot in LA, and we can shoot in Chicago. It'll be on the same level as those other 2 cities.
Thank you. And just one last point, Alex and Gary, yes, all of my students, whenever they have downtime here at school, they're watching an episode of something on their phone, pretty much. Am I right on that? Is that fair? Yeah, all right. Round of applause, really quick, go ahead. Thank you. We have, about a half hour left, and so what I'd like to do now, students and everybody, I just want to open it up now to your general questions. Obviously, we couldn't get to all the questions you created, so what you've heard, what you still want to know, this is very simple. You raise a hand, we'll try to call on you, and panelists, maybe if you could repeat the question into the microphone, just so I make sure for the stream we kind of know what's going on, and we'll go from there.
I'll try to get to them in the crowd.
Oh, right on. I wasn't sure about feedback, but yeah, we'll give it a shot.
Okay. Becca, do you want to get this side or the other side? All right. So get my steps in for today.
All right. I have a question for Adam. My name is Shane. But like before I tell you my question, my dad, before Mr. Ash kind of like basically explained that you're going to be here, my dad kind of like told me what you are and how he like really likes you. Not
He likes me?
well, yeah, not like he likes listening to you.
Oh. That's nice. I'm not on the air. I'm behind the scenes, but
like,
I get it. They make fun of me.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
nice to
yeah.
hear something nice. I usually get complaint phone calls from listeners every day,
no.
so it's
he
nice.
He just likes,
it's
you
nice.
know, listening.
You never get the positive calls. You only get the negative calls.
But my question is, do you like, how can I word this? Like, when you're explaining this to people, like how you are today and maybe other times, like, what is your favorite part about doing that? And is there any way that you could change your life, like, through your career?
I wanted to be in television. I wanted to do television production. It was the time I was getting out of college, I couldn't find a job in TV. I wanted to be a TV producer and director for baseball games. I did an internship at WMTH-TV years ago. The late Harry Carey, they had a very famous director. His name was Arnie Harris, and he was a longtime Cubs director. Do you remember Arnie Harris? So I got to do an internship in the truck with him, and Mandy Cohn was the old Cubs producer at the time. And it was the greatest internship I ever did. And I said, everybody wanted to be Harry Carey. I wanted to be Arnie Harris. I thought he had the coolest job. He told Harry almost, at that point, it was his last season, what to say. And he was directing all the shots and talking to the producers. And I thought it was just a great job. And I couldn't get a job in that out of school. I could have if I moved. A lot of my friends moved. I didn't want to move at the time. Looking back, I do have maybe some regrets for not moving. But at the time, I had some things, so I stayed here. What I love about the job is I don't feel like it's always work, and I didn't want to always work. I don't want to go to a desk job. I have a lot of friends who are lawyers or accountants who are, I don't want to say they're miserable, but they're miserable. They go to a job and sit there behind a desk, and it's not much excitement, and they wait for those points in the day to look for sports content or to listen to sports content, and I get to be around it all day. I get to watch sports. Like, I can't get in trouble for having, I have 2 TVs in my office. I have sports on the TV. My wife can't yell at me. My boss in Bristol can't yell at me. It's part of the job. Like, I have sports going on. It's on the radio. It's on TV. It's on the computer. So that's what I love. It doesn't always feel like work for me. It feels like more of, I don't want to say a hobby, because there is obviously a business management part of it that I have to deal with every day. But I still feel like I said, like we're in the toy department. We're working in sports and sports talk in Chicago, where I grew up in Chicago, so I love these teams. So that's, I hope that answers your question. It doesn't always feel like work for me. I get up very early in the morning to get downtown, just because we have a lot of things early in the morning. We carry a network morning show from Bristol, so. But I wake up every day, and I'm extremely excited to get in, because it's a fresh script every day. You never know what the news is going to be or what breaking news will happen. Some of my favorite days are when we know what we're going to talk about. Oh, it's Bears and Jets this week. We're going to talk about this, and then 2 minutes before the show, a breaking news story happens. And you have to scrap everything that you were going to do. You have to cancel all the guests, cancel all the topics, and you have to shift into, a breaking news story. Those are some of the most exciting days for me. But every day changes, which I enjoy. And like I said, I love being around Chicago sports, 4 out of the 5 teams. But I still deal with the Cubs. That's okay. I'm not a Cub hater. I just want to make that clear. Just because I like the White Sox, I'm just not one of those people that root for both teams. That's all I want. That's all I want to say about that.
I have a question for Alex. How much margin for, I don't know how to explain this because I'm put on the spot. How much room for error do you have if you're shooting live and, like, for example, if something goes out, do you have like a fail-safes, like live, like a camera goes out, do you like instantly switch to another camera like that quick?
Yeah, so definitely, like a Fox and NBC, there is going to be no problem. They have backup cameras, backup lights, backup everything. They redo their audio all the time. There's never a worry about a mistake. They'll fix it. It's not like It's not like DePaul students might shoot something and it might be a little bit more of a issue, right? I mean, if a camera goes out,
Well, it depends where they're shooting. If they're shooting at CineSpace, we got backups. If they're out on location, then they got to deal with what they got.
Hello, Mr. Novak. My name is Alicia Hussein, and my question is for you is that as we are trying to build ourselves up in the film industry, what is the best way to get our content recognized? Like, is it by doing short films or getting recognition from a higher person?
It's all of that in some respects. I mean, I think, as I said before, it's the beauty of technology today is nothing is stopping you from making a movie. I think short form content is the way to start, whether it's a short film or a web series. Is a way to potentially go. And I think it depends where you are. I think also in your career. I think right now I would focus on content. Right? If you've got a well-told story and the production value isn't quite there, that well-told story will go a long way. If the thing looks great, but the story sucks, it ain't going to go too far. I mean, you could basically, that's the state of the film industry today. It's like what Hollywood does well is production value. The thing I think they're struggling with is making relevant stories. The key is to tell your story. I mean, your story. Make those personal stories. All great films, as far as I'm concerned, are personal films. I could give you all an assignment here to make a film. And, ideally, I don't know how many people are here, 50, 60 people, I would get 50, 60 different films if you were telling your story. Find your voice, tell the stories that you want to tell. That's the key. The beauty of this industry, too, is that, you've got your reel. And what people are going to judge you by is the things that you can make. And so if you make stuff, that's a good path to follow.
Hi, my name is Patrick, and I had a question for Adam. Is it difficult working in sports radio in Chicago where some of our teams aren't doing too well?
Yes. That answer it? There's a good question. There's no doubt that sports talk and sports content in Chicago, you kind of go as the teams go. There's no doubt. It's funny, when the Bears are really good, it's great. When they're really bad, it's even better. So even though I'm a Bears fan, when they're 3-13 or 2-14, boy, are the ratings good because, people just want to vent about it. It's unbelievable. But when they're average, when they're 8-8, oh, it's a terrible season. But it's true. The Cubs have been very hot the last few years, so that's definitely built more of an audience. The Bears are always a hot topic, but like I say, if they're average, it's terrible. But like I said, I love the Bears, but if they go 2-14, I'm not so upset about it because I know that the audience is extremely there. So, good question, though.
Hi, my name's Sam, and I have another question for Adam. So, me, my friend Paul, and two of our other friends have a sports talk show, but we only talk about baseball. And
how come?
We all love baseball.
Okay. You not know other sports, or you just decide just to do baseball talk?
Well, I've played baseball since I was like 3, so it was like.
But do you like other sports?
I mean, I used to.
Okay. All right.
Like,
Sorry.
yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
I don't know.
Sorry. It always turns into focus group with me. I always like to know what students are consuming. So keep going. Sorry.
But no, like being a professional, does it make more sense to, like, because there's some sports shows where it's like NFL Live. Kevin Millar has a show on ESPN where intentional talk, where it's just baseball. Does it make more sense to keep our show just talking about baseball, or try to expand what you guys do, where you talk about each sport?
Are you doing it for the school?
Yeah, we do it through WMTH.
Okay, is it a weekly?
2 days a week.
And it's 1 hour?
It's between half hour to an hour.
And do you talk about why you're just doing baseball, or you just get into the baseball and that's it? You're just doing baseball talk?
Well, like, we did a show yesterday, and we talked about the World Series Game 1, and we previewed the rest of the series.
Okay, okay. So it's not just local like Sox and Cubs, it's all baseball.
It's all throughout baseball.
Yeah, I would say if you can, it's good to be a niche like that, but I would say if you could expand to the other sports or the other local teams,
Okay.
I think you just, put yourself in a box, and you don't, there's some people that don't like baseball, they want football talk, or they want basketball talk.
Okay.
I know it's not easy to be like a sports variety show, but if you try to, moderation a little bit for everybody, then you're not going to deny those football or basketball fans with just baseball talk. So if you guys have it in you and you like it, you're interested in the other sports, I would say go for it, expand on that, but that's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that would just be my opinion.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Send me some. I'd like to listen to it and give you some feedback. Seriously, if anybody has anything, I'll leave my card with Dr. Ash, and you guys can send me some audio.
You got a promotion.
Did I say your name wrong?
Not quite, no. Mr. Ash is fine.
Mr. Ash. Anyway, he's a doctor to me.
My name's Will, and I have another question for Adam. I'm looking to get into sports broadcast on the TV side, so would possibly doing an internship in radio be a good start?
Sure. Yeah. You want to be on air TV?
Yeah, sports
yeah,
announcer.
I think anything you can get your foot in the door, radio, TV, any other media company, I think, like I said, networking and meeting people is a huge part of this business. So you never know where a radio job could lead you to or a TV job could lead you to. So don't think that just because you want to be on TV, you need to try to go to a television station. You can start in a PR firm or a radio station and meet people that, buy television advertising who know somebody who knows somebody. So in this business, it's, like I said, it's all about networking. So I don't think you need to just TV. I think the more you know about every part of the business, radio, if you do a radio, little TV, everything, the more valuable you make yourself to an employer. If you come in with tons of experience at a radio station, a TV station, it only helps. If you're just pigeonholed into one, it's okay, but it's not as valuable as having multiple.
Probably time for a couple of more, so.
Hi, my name is John. This one's for Alex and Gary. When you were younger, did you ever make like short films of your own or student films?
Yeah. I think as a, first film I ever made was, I think, my first year in college, which would have been, 1980. And I do remember in high school having plans for making stuff. We never got it off the ground because it would have been involved shooting on Super 8 film, if anyone here even knows what Super 8 is. But
that's a movie that J.J. Abrams directed.
yeah, well,
right?
I was using that before it was a movie. But anyways, yeah, I think really the key to anything is to make it, to do it. I mean, somebody asked, many questions ago, one of the distinguishing characteristics of DePaul. One of the distinguishing characteristics of DePaul is our philosophy is the best way to learn how to make movies is to make them. The more you make, the better off you are, and I think that's the key. If you have an urge to tell a story, tell it. And the other thing you got to keep in mind, it's a process, right? You don't view that first film that you make as going to be your magnum opus. It's just one step along the way. I think every director, when they look at all of their films, always see the flaws. There's no such thing as a perfect movie. I mean, for that matter, if you want to get philosophical on a Thursday morning, perfection is impossible to obtain by imperfect beings. We're imperfect. There's no way in the world we can make perfect, right? The best thing we could do is the best thing we can do. So make your films. Make a lot of them. The more you make, the better filmmaker you're going to be.
Yeah, myself, I didn't do anything in high school or college, but now with the incubator, I invest in films. I definitely, that's kind of the arm I do. I partake in at CineSpaces. We have, again, because there is such a need for content, and you can sell your stuff now better than probably any time in the history of selling content, CineSpace invests in projects, and a lot of them are from DePaul students.
Yeah, the thing you got to keep in mind is when I was your age, and if I was sitting in a room like this back in 1978, you know, the motto, the advice that people would give filmmakers is, great that you're pursuing your passion, but you should have something to fall back on, right? You know, yeah, pursue film, but have something to fall back on. The day for having something to fall back on is gone. We're walking around with stuff in our pockets that can stream content. The demand for content is insatiable. Everything needs content. The idea that you need something to fall back on if you're going into media these days no longer applies. They're looking for people that can use the latest technology to tell stories. And whether those stories are films, television shows, streaming content that appears on websites, podcasts, radio, the need is there. And here's the beauty of it for you guys. They can't afford to hire me. But you coming fresh out of school with knowing all of these tools and the ability to tell a story, they're going to hire you because you know what you're doing and you're cheaper. It's still a business when it comes right down to it. I'd kill to be you guys, metaphorically, not literally.
So I'm going to disagree with Gary a little bit here on a few things. I do think you should have something to fall back on. I don't think that means that you shouldn't study film or media or theater or whatever it is. But you do need to not just put all of your eggs in one basket. And I think what a lot of us have talked about here is sort of the hustle of what you're doing and creating content now. As he said, there's no reason why you can't make a movie now. There's no reason why you can't have a radio program now, or write a blog, or have a film review site, or whatever the case may be. Diversify yourself. But the reality is that you're going to have to probably maybe have extra jobs on the side until you make it, as it were. And not all of you will make it, right? So you got to figure out how you can have a happy life and feel fulfilled with what you're doing. And what I often used to tell my interns is, you know, you might also have to be a barista, right, while you're in college. You can't just like have your internship, which is probably going to be unpaid, unless you have some sort of a trust fund somewhere that's going to be bankrolling your life, which most of us don't, right? So if you are a barista, but you aspire to also make films, well then maybe the open mic night at the Starbucks, you're gonna film that performer and put something out on YouTube, right? So you gotta create a little bit of your own opportunity and a little bit of your own luck. A lot of it is luck. There's gonna be a lot of hardworking people, but a lot of it is also being in the right place at the right time and making those connections with your network as well.
If I could just add, you guys have great equipment, I know, here at Maine East, because I was making movies in class, in Mr. Wunderlich's class. I'm sure he remembers the Red Kimono and Blood Brothers. They were two of the classics that were ever developed up there at WMTH. But I really did, because I didn't want to do radio. I didn't do much radio in high school or college. I think I said I did TV and film, and there used to be a great class here, film study. I'm not sure if they still offer that. But yeah, I think you guys have great equipment currently at all the schools to put to use. So.
Yeah, I think that is accurate. It's always tough trying to figure out what to acquire and, you know, when to make leaps forward in technology. Let's have one more round of applause. And again, cannot thank you enough for the time that you devoted to being here today. We have a few minutes left, so really this is very simple. If you guys don't mind just hanging out for a little bit, we'll have lunch in a few more minutes, and you guys are more than welcome to stay, but you obviously have commitments as well. But with the few minutes that we do have left, if you guys just want to come up and talk, maybe take a photo or two, if there's individual things you want to talk and speak to these individuals about before they depart, we'll have a little bit of open time now before lunch. Oh, one second, yes. Okay.
Auditorium, seats, all that kind of stuff. You can even sit on the stage. But this is your time right now to visit with our presenters if you wish. And how amazing is it to have these excellent professionals here That's just awesome. All right.